This not, but see, this is where it gets even weirder, at least weird to my way of looking at it, is that comment not being alone, and being alone not being good, I should say, that's not just about sex and marriage, is it? If you think about it, at its heart, sex and marriage are really about the first community. What's the first community that any of us experience? Family. And when we build a society, where do the members of a society get their first training on how to live in a society? Family. So maybe, and again, just maybe, here's the connection. That the lessons of what it means to be male and female, hidden in this theology, are not just about, well, let's make sure that sex and marriage work correctly, but that we're made not to be alone. That there is this unity that is rooted in family that is meant to be a connection between all the members of this species. Therefore, it is not good that we are alone. We are called, rather, to see that these other communities we interact with, the state of the church, the state of our society at large, all of these are rooted on how healthy families are. And therefore, one can easily see that this theology of the body, here at the beginning, has as much to do with a healthy society and speaking against this unfortunate modern attitude of being the Marlboro man who goes off on his own and I'll just do it by myself and my actions don't affect anybody else, and that's my personal favorite, by the way, teenagers. But my personal favorite comment always is, well, I don't have to go to confession because my sins don't affect anybody but me and God. And I always ask them, okay, let's just buy that for instance. What's the last bad thing you think you've done? Well, I stole from my little brother. Okay, stop. What did you take? Well, I took $50. Hey, whoever that little brother is, I want his allowance. I said, what was he going to use that money for? Well, I think he really wanted a new PlayStation game somewhere. I said, so when you took that $50 from him, what happened? Well, he cried when he couldn't buy it. Right. So, your sin actually affected somebody else, didn't it? Oh, I guess. This is why I think of this passage from Genesis as, well, this is my nickname. It's an existential boomerang. Okay? It's an existential boomerang. St. Thomas used much better language for this. He called it the exitus and the reditus. That just as man has come into being because God has given him existence, man, recognizing what his origin is, wants to go back to his origin. He wants to go back to where he came from. Well, to me, that's just what? It's an existential boomerang. God goes, poof! Have being. Have something you don't have on your own. Share an existence. Poof! But just like a boomerang, it swings out and wants to come back to the one who threw it in the first place. Otherwise, because what do you call a boomerang that can go back to its owner? It's a stick. So if the boomerang never goes back to its owner, did it ever fulfill its purpose? No. So in the same way, poof! You have been thrown into existence. And the whole purpose of, or at least one of the trajectories of life, is to come back to the hand of the truth. Now, I watch the time. See, I love the sound of my own voice. So I talk, I'm essentially voice acting, is what it is. My own voice or anybody else's. So now we need to ask this question. How are we going to make that real? Okay. How are we going to make this real? How do we make that gift of self something concrete? All right? Because it's nice to talk about, oh yes, my entire existence is the gift of self. And if it stays just a level of an idea, then it's kind of worthless. Okay? It's sort of like, well, And it was one thing to go on that program, before I was on a program, to say, oh yes, clearly I need to lose weight. Yes, eat less, move more. Hand me those Twinkies. Having a nice idea is simply nice, but it's useless. It's got to translate into an action. Okay? But the good news is that a properly formed idea makes the best kind of actions. So it's good news. Okay? So let's stop and think about this. And we'll stay in the theology of the body. Jesus runs afoul of the Pharisees in Matthew 19 concerning this question of divorce. Now, to give you a little background, remember that in the Roman world, divorce was relatively common, as it was in the Jewish world. But the difference is that because Israel was an occupied territory, anything you said, you had to keep in mind what a Roman official would think if he overheard it. Okay? We happily don't live like that. But certainly, many of our fellow people here on earth live in cultures like that. Certainly it was only what? I was in high school when the Soviet Union fell. Many of you guys, if you were born if you were born after 1991, you lived in a world without the Soviet Union. That always plays with my mind. When I talk to my high school students, I remind them that I lived in a world that didn't have cell phones or the internet. Or computers. My first computer was an IBM with the 5.25-inch disc of death. That if you looked at it wrong or breathed on it funny, and you lose all the data. It was a floppy. Okay. It was some high-tech stuff. Anyway, we have to keep this in mind, though, that whatever Jesus answers, you can imagine them run off and tell the Romans or the Roman collaborators. Mark's gospel is very good about pointing that out by showing that the Pharisees and the Herodians, the party of King Herod, who was a dupe of the Roman government, were in cahoots at times. Okay? So, they get into this conversation, and the Pharisees came to him and tested him by asking, is it lawful to divorce anyone's wife for any cause? Now, as much as I like to think that this was an honest theological chit-chat, there's one little piece of history that we have to remember. What was one of the Herodians known for? One of the sons of Herod? Well, he did a sort of odd thing where he divorced his wife and married the wife of one of the other members of his own family. They're always on that. Anyway, see, that's the other thing Bible learning. For people who tell you studying the Bible or studying ancient history is boring, they're reading the wrong books. Because if you ever want something that's action-packed, just read the story of the Roman emperors, especially when you get to Caligula. Take your time on Caligula. He's a hoot. Okay? But with that answer now, Jesus could be trapped. If Jesus says yes, then he might be no different than any of the rabbis. And that means that the Pharisees can then, well, metaphorically at least, crucify him for all the other times when he breaks the law. And if he says no, well, not only will the Pharisees be upset, but maybe people higher up the food chain will be upset. Jesus answers them. Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning, male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one? Where did he go? Right back to Genesis. So they look at him and say, okay, wait a minute. So why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? This is given in Deuteronomy, which is late in the story of the law, and really comes after 3 times that people fail to keep the covenant at Sinai, and it has to be essentially repatched together. Have you not heard?